They opened a sealed bunker and found a shelf full of skulls. And then the concrete began to scream. In this video you'll hear raw recordings, meet the people who found the bones, examine forensic clues, and weigh 3 chilling explanations: acoustic phenomena, human ritual,
or something stranger.
Stay until the end. One piece of paper we found changes everything. For more videos like this, please consider subscribing to our channel. If you do like this real life stories, please like this impossible to ignore.
In the third bunker,
and scrawled with names. One name matched a missing person listed in a wartime roll call. The paper carried faint human protein residue and traces of soot consistent with the fire.
This was not a random dump. This was a record,
and it tied bones to people who vanished during the war. If the ledger is authentic, the skulls aren't anonymous relics. They are missing townspeople. We had samples analyzed. Drill marks that penetrate the skull suggest tool use post-mortem or peri-mortem. Scorch patterns on several crania indicate exposure to intense heat. Pigment analysis revealed iron oxide traces consistent with red ochre, a material used in traditional ritual contexts and, occasionally, in improvised wartime signaling. The patterns don't fit accidental collapse or natural displacement. There's intent and technique in how these remains were treated. On a moonless night, we placed sensitive microphones and low-frequency monitors in the largest bunker.
The consoles spiked. What we recorded, once amplified, was a low harmonic pattern that resembles human vocalization, a muffled keening, a chord of tones that shift like voices pressed through stone. Acoustic engineers warned us, concrete tunnels create resonant chambers and wind can make strange noises. But the recorded harmonics matched the time and location of reports from witnesses who said they heard the bunker scream at high tide. The sound was real. The source remained ambiguous. At 13 a.m., during our final night inside Bunker C, the thermal camera picked up movement in a narrow crawl space. We followed with a torch and found a line of skulls arranged like an audience, facing a narrow slot that opens to the sea. Beside them, a small bowl and a single child's shoe. When we played back the low-frequency recording from the same minute, the audio contained a short, piercing cry clear enough that everyone in the bunker heard it without the speakers. Not wind, not a machine. A human-sounding keening that rose and fell like someone crying through a door. The cry sent our team out into the night shaking. The thermal feed showed no human figure. Cameras caught no one on the path. The cry came from somewhere inside the walls. We presented our evidence to local authorities and forensic teams. Bunkers were sealed, remains cataloged, and samples sent for deeper analysis. We found partial answers and deeper questions, tangible clues that point to wartime loss and intentional placement, and acoustic phenomena that can transform the dead silence into a living sound. The ledger gives names back to the bones. The recordings force us to listen, and the arrangement of objects asks us to consider ritual, grief, or a desperate attempt at memorial. This story centers on a cluster of World War II-era bunkers along a wind-swept coastline. Built between 1939 and 1944, these concrete pillboxes once sheltered soldiers, lookouts, and civilians during air raids. Decades later, the bunkers fell into disrepair. Key players, Tom and Aisha, hobbyists who opened the first bunker. A local historian who provided wartime records. Dr. Elena Markov, a forensic anthropologist who analyzed the bones, and an archivist who recognized names in the ledger. The incident unfolds in a small community still scarred by wartime absence and long-held rumors. After the first skull was photographed, multiple openings revealed similar finds. Each discovery raised red flags, drill holes that looked deliberate, soot indicating fire exposure, pigment applied in consistent patterns, and objects arranged with intent: bowls, single shoes, a rusted spoon. Locals reported hearing crying from the cliffs. The more we uncovered, the more it looked less like scattered war casualties and more like deliberate placement, possibly by survivors, possibly by later visitors with unknown motives. We interviewed witnesses who swore they'd never seen the bones before. We consulted forensics and archaeologists who described perimortem versus post-mortem marks. Samples showed iron oxide pigment, soot residue, and microscopic bone remodeling consistent with both trauma and exposure to fire. Audio engineers analyzed recordings and found low-frequency harmonics consistent with resonant amplification. The ledger fragment tied names to people reported missing in wartime lists. Together, these facts formed a chain. Missing persons gives ledger notation, gives skulls and bunkers, gives acoustic phenomena. Each link strengthened the case that these remains belong to real, named people, not props or hoaxes. Still, critical mysteries remain. Who arranged the skulls? If the ledger is wartime, were these burials moved later for safekeeping? Or were bodies placed intentionally afterwards as part of a ritual or to hide evidence? Was the red pigment a sign of mourning, a ritual marking, or something else? Could the cries be explained entirely by infrasound and wind, or does the timing and clarity suggest an unknown source? Skeptics warn of hoaxes. Believers see a pattern of grief and ritual. For now, the bunkers keep their secrets. Tom and Aisha found the first skull on a shelf wrapped in cloth. Their discovery was cautious, photographed, and shared on a local forum. That post led to another opening where a dozen skulls sat in careful rows. An archivist recognized a name from a wartime ledger we later recovered in Bunker C. The ledger's smudged pencil marks matched municipal lists of missing townspeople from the 1940s. Dr. Elena Markov analyzed the bones and noted perimortem trauma on several specimens. An acoustic engineer amplified low-frequency recordings that matched witness accounts. These people and pieces link together into a human story. Skulls were found placed on shelves inside sealed World War II bunkers. Marks on bone and pigment traces indicate deliberate post-mortem manipulation. A ledger fragment with names suggests the bones might correspond to missing persons. Acoustic recordings captured low-frequency sounds that resemble human vocalizations, at times coinciding with witness reports of screams from the bunkers. Three principal explanations emerge. 1. Practical wartime or post-war action. Victims of air raids or disease were collected and placed temporarily in bunkers, later left there as records vanished. 2. Ritual or symbolic placement. Survivors, grieving families, or later visitors used skulls and acts of remembrance or cultural practice, marking them with pigment and arranging objects. 3. Human foul play. Bones placed to conceal crimes or as trophies. Each explanation fits some facts and contradicts others. The ledger favors the first or second theories. The intentional marks and pigments lean toward ritual or human agency, and the secrecy and odd placement allow for darker possibilities. We documented the sites with 3D scans and photography, collected bone and pigment samples under chain of custody protocols, and sent them to independent labs for osteological and chemical analysis. Acoustic engineers recorded ambient frequencies and amplified low-band sounds for pattern analysis. Archivists cross-referenced names in the ledger with wartime municipal lists. Witness statements were recorded and compared for consistency. All these methods combined to create the timeline and narrow possible explanations. The red ochre pigment wasn't random. It matched pigment used in a local pre-war funeral custom, a tradition nearly forgotten by most residents. One skull bore a drilled hole that aligned with a surgical intervention style used in wartime battlefield medicine, suggesting that at least one individual received attempted treatment before death. Beneath one skull, we found a faint fingerprint in soot on rusted metal, a partial print that modern techniques might one day match to descendants. We treated everything with reverence. Authorities were contacted. Forensics handled the samples. Human remains are people's relatives, not props. If you explore old sites, report finds to authorities so proper care and identification can occur. These skulls were once people with families, names, and futures robbed by war. The bunkers hold their silence and sometimes their cries. If you've heard similar stories, have family records, or recognize a name, contact the investigation team. Share this video to bring more eyes to the case. Comment below. What do you think caused the screams? Natural acoustics, ritual placement, or something else? We will follow up as forensic results come in. For now, remember, the past is not finished with us. It asks to be heard. If this gripped you, like, share, and subscribe for updates on the investigation and more documented mysteries. Vote in the pinned poll. Which theory do you believe? Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay respectful, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.